The international terminal buzzed at the sound of modern travel, rolling suitcases, flight announcements, and the murmur of countless journeys. For most, this was just a gateway between lives. But for Officer Jake Miller, it was a hunting ground. He stood near security, his posture relaxed but eyes constantly scanning the river of people. Beside him was his partner, Thor, a German shepherd whose intelligent eyes missed nothing. Thor wasn't just a dog. He was a living radar detecting threats no machine could find. Their bond, built over 5 years, was a silent language of trust and understanding. Jake reached down, his fingers finding a familiar place behind Thor's ear. "Another day, partner," he murmured. "Let's see what the world brings us today." Thor's tail gave a single, slow wag in response, his gaze never stopping its methodical sweep. The scent of coffee mixed with disinfectant and jet fuel. It was then that Thor first hesitated, so subtle that anyone else would have missed it. A slight pause in his step, a tiny twitch of his nose. Jake felt it through the leash, a change in the dog's energy. "What is it, boy?" he asked softly. The dog let out a soft, low grunt, muscles tense like a taut arrow pointing toward passengers from an Eastern European flight. Jake's hand tightened on the leash. He trusted this dog with his life. He remembered how Thor had found hidden explosives in a parked car, located a lost child in a dense forest, and pinpointed drugs sealed in motor oil. If Thor was alert, there was a reason. Jake scanned the crowd, a tired family, students with backpacks, a businessman on his phone. Nothing seemed wrong. Then, as quickly as it came, the tension left Thor's body. He relaxed and looked up at Jake, his expression returning to normal. Jake let out a deep breath he didn't realize he was holding. A wave of relief washed over him. "False alarm, huh?" he said, giving Thor a reassuring pat. "Maybe just someone's leftover lunch from a flight." He chuckled, the knot of anxiety in his stomach finally loosening. He checked his watch, 10:05 a.m. He decided to move toward baggage claim, part of the standard route. Thor walked obediently at his heel, people giving them space. For 10 minutes, it was routine, past carousels with lost luggage dramas, past customs desks. The world operated as it should. It was then that the woman appeared. She came from the main entrance, not an arriving flight. Average height, slender, with a pronounced pregnancy. Her mousy brown hair was in a simple ponytail. She wore a long beige trench coat over a gray knit sweater stretched tightly over her swollen belly. In her left hand, she carried a large, expensive-looking leather tote bag. It was her movement that caught Jake's eye. While everyone else had purpose, she seemed to drift. Her steps were slow and oddly deliberate. She wasn't browsing shops or looking for flights. Her gaze was fixed ahead toward security, her mouth a grim, tight line behind large sunglasses. Jake felt a prickle of professional interest. Her body language was all wrong. Most pregnant women moved with careful, protective grace. This woman moved with stiff, rigid control. He didn't even need to look at Thor. He felt the change through the leash first. The slack vanished. The leather pulled taut as Thor stopped dead. This wasn't a subtle twitch. This was a full body alert. The dog's head was up, ears pitched forward, nostrils flaring. A low, vibrating growl came from Thor's throat. It was a sound Jake had heard only in the most serious situations, a deep, primal warning. "Thor," Jake said, his voice firm but calm. "Easy." The dog ignored him, his world narrowing to the woman in the beige coat. His focus was absolute, body trembling with energy. The woman was about 30 feet away, approaching security, completely unaware. Jake's mind raced. Pregnant woman, expensive bag, wrong body language. And Thor, his most reliable partner, was reacting as if she were a walking bomb. Protocol warred with instinct, but 5 years of partnership screamed at him to listen. The woman reached the back of the security line. She set her tote bag down, adjusting her shoulder strap. It was then that Jake saw it, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor in her hand. More than nerves. The tremor of sheer, unadulterated fear. Thor's growl deepened, rising in volume. People nearby began to notice, turning heads. The air changed, thickening with anticipation. Jake made his decision. He tightened his grip on the leash, knuckles white. "Steady, boy," he whispered, eyes locked on the woman. "I see her." He took a step forward, then another, closing the distance. The woman, sensing the shift, finally turned her head. Her dark sunglasses pointed directly at Jake and the growling dog. Her body went rigid. Her hand flew to her belly in a protective gesture that, to Jake's now suspicious eyes, looked a little too practiced. In that frozen moment, Thor made the choice for him. The dog lunged forward, not to attack, but to point, body straining as he unleashed a single sharp, deafening bark that cut to the terminal's hum like a gunshot. The bubble of normalcy exploded. Conversation stopped. Heads swiveled. All eyes were on the pregnant woman, the police officer, and the dog accusing her of an unimaginable crime. The woman's face drained of all color. Her carefully constructed composure shattered into pure, undisguised panic. The echo of Thor's bark seemed to hang in the air, transforming the bustling terminal into a frozen scene. For a heart-stopping second, nobody moved. All attention was laser-focused on the drama near the security line. Officer Jake Miller's training kicked in. His primary concern was control of his partner, the situation, and the crowd. He planted his feet, using his body weight to counter Thor's pull. "Thor, heel," he commanded, his voice cutting through the silence. But Thor, for the first time in their 5-year partnership, did not immediately obey. A low, continuous growl rumbled in his chest. The dog's entire being was focused on the pregnant woman, muscles coiled, eyes fixated. It wasn't aggressive posture, but something more frantic, a desperate attempt to communicate danger. The spell was broken by the woman's voice, a high, trembling plea. "Please," she cried, hands fluttering over her belly. "Make him stop. He's frightening me." Her accent was faint, but the fear was universal. This human sound broke the crowd's stillness. A murmur began to ripple outwards. Phones were lifted to record. "Ma'am, please remain calm and stay where you are," Jake said, directing his voice toward her while keeping his eyes on Thor. He used his calm, de-escalation tone, but inside his mind raced. He saw how she clutched her stomach. The gesture seemed instinctive, but there was a rigidity to it, as if holding something in place. A fellow officer, Davis, jogged over. "Jake, what's going on?" "Everything okay?" he asked, eyes darting between the distressed woman and the agitated dog. "I don't know yet," Jake replied quietly. Thor's locked onto her. He's never done this without a cause. The woman took a shaky step backward, her large tote bag swinging and bumping against her leg. The sound it made was subtle, a faint metallic clink that was swallowed by the growing crowd noise, but Jake, hyper-aware, caught it. His eyes narrowed. Asterisk for metallic sound? From a pregnant woman's bag? That's all wrong. Asterisk when a pregnant woman's bag would make a sound like that? Baby bottles were plastic. Diapers were soft. "Please, I haven't done anything wrong," the woman insisted, her voice gaining a desperate edge. Tears welled in her eyes behind the large sunglasses. "I just want to go home. My flight." She gestured vaguely toward departure. It was a compelling performance. She looked like vulnerable, bewildered maternity. But Jake's suspicion, once ignited, was hard to extinguish. He trusted people to wear masks and lie. But he trusted Thor to see through them. Thor let out another sharp, frustrated bark and lunged forward with enough force that Jake had to brace himself. The movement made the woman yelp and stumble back, her face losing what little color remained. "Whoa, easy, Thor." Jake grunted, shortening the leash. He shot a look at Davis. "We need to move her to secondary screening. Now." Davis nodded, expression turning serious. He signaled to 2 other security agents, who began moving in with firm, official purpose. Seeing the uniforms converge, the woman's panicked act cracked, revealing something harder beneath. Her crying stopped abruptly. Her body, slumped in fear, straightened slightly. "This is a mistake," she said, her voice suddenly lower, tighter. "You can't do this. I'm pregnant. Do you have any idea the stress you're causing?" She was no longer just frightened. She was now arguing her case, using her condition as a shield. Jake recognized the shift immediately. The tears were gone, replaced by a cold, calculating glare, The revolver was showing. It was a classic tactic he'd seen before, but it only solidified his resolve. An innocent person would typically be confused or indignant, wanting to clear things up. Her shift into legalistic argument felt rehearsed. The two security agents reached her. "Ma'am, we just need to ask a few questions and check your belongings. It will only take a moment," one said, voice placating. "No," she said, voice rising with defiance, not fear. She hugged her tote bag closer, turning her shoulder away. "You have no right. I know my rights. I want a supervisor." The crowd's murmuring grew louder. A few shouted support. "Leave her alone," someone yelled. "She's pregnant, for God's sake." Jake felt the situation teetering on edge. He needed to act decisively. He handed Thor's leash to Davis. "Hold him. Keep him back, but let him watch." Davis took the leash, gripped firm on the powerful dog who was still whining and straining. Jake stepped forward, closing the final distance. He removed his cap, a small gesture to appear less intimidating. "Ma'am," he said, voice low for her only, "my dog is a certified detection canine. He signals on specific scents. Right now, he's signaling on you. That gives us cause. You can come voluntarily to private screening, or this becomes official detention. The choice is yours, but we are not letting you board that flight." He looked into the dark lenses of her sunglasses. For a long moment, she was silent, chest heaving. He could see calculations happening behind those shielded eyes. The escape routes were closing. The performance was failing. Her shoulders slumped into feet that didn't reach her hands, still clenched white-knuckled around her bag strap. "Fine," she whispered, fight draining into hollow resignation. "But this is harassment. I will file a complaint." "That is your right, ma'am," Jake said evenly. He nodded to security agents, who gently but firmly took her elbows and guided her toward the authorized personnel-only door. As she was led away, Jake took Thor's leash from Davis. The dog immediately fell silent. The barking and growling ceased, but he didn't relax. His body remained tense, eyes tracking the woman's every step. He let out a soft, concerned whine, holding more worry than triumph. Jake looked down at his partner, his faithful compass pointing toward truth. The first part was over. They had contained the situation. But as he watched the woman disappear through the security door, head bowed, Jake knew with cold certainty that the real mystery was just beginning. What had Thor smelled? And what was the woman so desperate to hide? The silence that followed the woman's departure was fragile, a thin veil over a terminal buzzing with renewed energy. The moment the authorized personnel-only door clicked shut, the spell broke completely. The airport's usual noise returned, but now laced with speculation and drama. Officer Jake Miller blocked it all out. His world had narrowed to 2 points: the closed door and the dog at his side. There was no longer straining or growling, but the tension in his body was palpable. He stood rigid, nose pointed at the door, whining softly, a high, anxious sound completely unlike his usual composure. "Jake, you sure about this?" Officer Davis asked, voice low. She looked pretty scared. "And the crowd, they're on her side. If this turns out to be nothing, the media will have a field day." Jake didn't take his eyes off the door. "It's not nothing, Mark," he said, using Davis's first name. "I've seen Thor alert to drugs sealed in concrete, to guns and oil. He's never been wrong. And he's never been this agitated. This was different. He wasn't pointing at her bag. He was pointing at her." The distinction was critical. Thor's focus had been unwavering, centered on the woman's midsection, as if the scent came from her body itself. Inside the private screening room, the atmosphere was sterile and tense. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh light on white walls. The woman, who gave her name as Elena Petrova, sat on a metal chair, hands clasped tightly. 2 security agents stood by the door while Specialist Linda Carter prepared screening equipment. "Ms. Petrova will do a quick scan of your person belongings," Carter said professionally. "Standard procedure. It will only take a moment." Elena's earlier defiance had melted into visible, trembling anxiety. She removed her sunglasses, revealing red-rimmed, darting eyes. "I understand," she whispered hoarsely. "I just want this over." Outside, Jake's radio crackled. Carter's voice. Miller, we're starting the scan. Your dog is still indicating. Confirm his behavior? Jake keyed his mic confirmed. He's stationary but fully alert. Focus on your location. Proceed with caution. He shifted his weight, the waiting agony. Asterisk, what if I'm wrong? What if this is just a scared pregnant woman and I've traumatized her for nothing? Asterisk, but then he looked at Thor, still tense, still focused, and his doubt faded. Back in the room, Carter ran the leather tote bag through a high-resolution scanner. The screen showed clothes, a wallet, a passport, some organic shapes. Nothing immediately raised flags, no clear weapon or drug packaging. Bag is clear, Carter announced, though her tone held uncertainty. She picked up a handheld metal detector and swab kit. Ms. Petrova, please stand with your arms slightly away from your body. Elena stood, movement slow and stiff. As she raised her arms, her trench coat fell open. The gray sweater underneath clung tightly to her pronounced belly. She winced, a sharp gasp escaping. Are you all right, ma'am? The female security agent asked, stepping forward. It's just a pain, Elena breathed, hand fluttering to her side. The stress, not good for the baby. Her face was pale, sweaty under the bright lights. Carter paused, professional demeanor warring with concern. She proceeded carefully, running the wand over Elena's arms, legs, and back. The device remained silent. She used the swab to collect samples from the woman's hands and bag, inserting it into the analyzer. The machine whirred, and a green light appeared. Negative for explosives. The security agents exchanged a look. Primary screening had found nothing. The pressure mounted. Outside, Thor suddenly let out a single, sharp bark, not frantic like before, but just as insistent. He pawed at the door, claws scraping metal. Jake's radio buzzed. Miller, we got nothing on the scan or swab. She's complaining of pain. Are you certain? Jake looked down at Thor. The dog looked back, dark eyes intense, almost pleading. He whined and nudged his nose hard against the door. He's never been this persistent, Jake thought. Asterisk, there's something here. I have to trust him. Asterisk. He's certain, Jake said into the radio, voice firm. The alert is on her person, not the bag. You need a pat-down. In the screening room, Carter received the instruction, face grim. Ms. Petrova, I need to perform a pat-down search. It will be in a private area by a female officer. You have the right to a witness. Elena's reaction was instantaneous and violent. No, she cried, stumbling back and wrapping arms around her stomach. You can't. I'm pregnant. You'll hurt the baby. This is inhuman. Tears returned, flowing freely. The performance was back, magnified by genuine terror. It was a genuine terror that convinced Jake, listening outside. Not fear of embarrassment, but bone-deep fear of discovery. Proceed with the pat-down, Jake said into his radio, tone leaving no argument. Medical is standby if she's genuinely in distress. Inside, the two female officers moved to escort a sobbing Elena into an adjacent private search room, her cries muffled as the door closed. For a long moment, silence from the other side. Thor sat but remained rigid, ears perked. He was waiting. Jake and Davis waited with him. The corridor feeling colder, the airport hummed distant. Then they heard it, not a cry of protest, but sharp, metallic clatter from the private room, followed by Specialist Carter's voice, raised not in alarm but stunned confusion. Miller, you need to see this. Now. Jake didn't hesitate. He opened the door and stepped inside, Thor following. The scene made his breath catch. Elena Petrova stood supported by the female agent, sobbing, body shaking uncontrollably. But it was her midsection that held everyone's gaze. The pronounced pregnant belly was lopsided. It had shifted, sagging unnaturally to one side. On the floor lay a curved, flesh-toned silicone shell, intricately detailed with a fake navel and stretch marks. Specialist Carter held a second, larger piece of the prosthetic, the main body of the pregnancy. It was hollow. Inside, nestled in custom foam, were dozens of small vacuum-sealed plastic bags filled with crystalline white powder. The truth was both simpler and more horrifying than any could imagine. Thor hadn't been barking at a pregnant woman. He'd been barking at a cleverly disguised walking container. The desperate barks weren't a signal of threat, but a desperate attempt to say the woman herself was a package, and she was in grave danger. The murmur in the terminal grew from a confused ripple into a loud, anxious wave as the officers closed in. The pregnant woman, Elena Petrova, stood frozen near the metal detector, her breathing shallow and rapid, her trembling hands clutching her large, expensive-looking leather tote bag as if it were her only lifeline. Behind her, smartphone screens lit up, recording the scene. The whispers were no longer just curious. They were speculative and increasingly sympathetic to the seemingly vulnerable woman. Officer Jake Miller stepped forward, positioning his body slightly between the crowd and Elena to reduce her audience and lower the temperature. He kept his tone calm but firm. "Ma'am, I need you to stay still and try to remain calm," he said, one hand maintaining a firm grip on Thor's leash. The German shepherd hackles were still raised, and his gaze remained unwaveringly locked on the woman's midsection. Each low growl seemed more urgent than the last, not aggressive, but intensely warning. "I told you, I haven't done anything wrong," she cried, the panic in her voice scaling higher. Her eyes darted around desperately, searching for sympathy. "He's terrifying me. Can't you see that? Look at him." She gestured wildly at Thor, who responded with another sharp, pointed bark. "I'm pregnant. For God's sake, have some decency." Jake's jaw tensed. He had heard genuine fear before, but there was a performative edge to hers, a layer of control beneath the hysterics. Still, his training demanded extreme caution. The optics of a male officer manhandling a so-called pregnant woman were a public relations nightmare. "We understand your concern, ma'am," he said evenly, "but for your safety and everyone else's, we need to perform a quick secondary screening. It's standard procedure." The two other officers, Daniels and Perez, moved to assist. Officer Perez, a woman with a calm demeanor, tried to gentle her approach. "We just need to run a quick check. Okay? It'll only take a minute. Then you can be on your way." The woman hesitated, her knuckles whitening as she clenched the leather tote. The pressure of her grip caused the bag to bend slightly, and for a fleeting second, the opening gaped. Jake's sharp eyes caught a flash of something inside, a glint of silver foil, winking under the terminal lights before disappearing back into the bag's shadowy interior. His pulse jumped. It was out of place. It was wrong. The metallic clink from before, and now this glint. It all connects, he thought. "Hold on," he said, his voice dropping an octave, losing its placating tone. "What's in the bag?" Her response was too quick, too rehearsed. "It's just baby things," she blurted. "Diapers, bottles, a change of clothes." "Please, you're embarrassing me in front of all these people." Before Jake could respond or demand she place the bag down, Thor made the decision for him. The dog barked again, a single deep, explosive sound that cut through the woman's pleas. The woman flinched violently, jerking backward as if struck. The sudden movement, combined with her trembling grip, caused the tote bag to slip. She fumbled, almost dropping it entirely, a gasp of sheer terror escaping her lips that had nothing to do with fear of the dog. That was it. The final piece clicked for Jake. His instinct, honed by years of partnership, screamed louder than the crowd. There wasn't just alerting, he was insisting. The flinch, the terror at nearly losing the bag, the metallic clues, it all painted a picture of guilt. "Daniels, Perez, take her to secondary screening. Now," Jake commanded, his voice leaving no room for debate. The officers moved swiftly. Perez gently but firmly took Elena by the arm, while Daniels reached for the tote bag. The woman's eyes wide in pure, unadulterated terror flashing across her face, starkly different from her earlier performative fear. For a brief, unguarded moment, Jake saw it clearly. Not fear of the dog, but bone-deep fear of being discovered. As the officers began to escort her away from the checkpoint toward the private security room, Thor's persistent growl finally faded into a low, concerned whine. He was no longer trying to warn them of a threat. He was now anxious about the threat being taken away. The crowd parted to let them pass, some people shaking their heads, others still filming. Jake exhaled slowly, the pounding in his chest only beginning to subside. He looked down at Thor, who was staring intently after the retreating woman, his body still tense. "Good work, partner," he whispered, rubbing the dog's neck firmly, feeling the rigid muscles beneath the fur. The gratitude was genuine, but tangled with apprehension. They had acted. They had followed protocol. They had trusted the K-9. But as he watched the door to the security room swing shut, sealing Elena Petrova and her secret inside, one thought echoed in his mind. What exactly had Thor just uncovered? And what price would they all pay for uncovering it? The private search room felt airless, the sterile white walls pressing in. For a long, suspended moment, nobody moved or spoke. The only sounds were Elena Petrova's ragged sobs and the soft rustle of crystalline powder settling in its revealed compartments. The carefully constructed illusion of motherhood lay in pieces on the floor, a grotesque parody of life designed to deceive. The reality was colder and more clinical than any had prepared for. Officer Jake Miller broke the stunned silence first. His voice was low, cutting through the shock. "Carter, secure that contraband. Full biohazard protocol." He turned to the female security agent supporting the trembling Elena. "Is she injured? Did she ingest any?" The agent, face pale, shook her head. "I don't think so. She's just shocked." Elena swayed, her hands fluttering over her now flat stomach clad only in a tight, flesh-toned undershirt. The revealed shape of her body was slender, healthy, and utterly not pregnant. Her performance had been so complete that the sight was jarring. My son," she whimpered, voice a broken thread. "They have my son. You don't understand." Jake's mind raced, connecting pieces. The desperation in Thor's bark, the metallic clink. Her over-the-top panic wasn't just about being caught. It was terror of failing her handlers. In that moment, she wasn't a smuggler anymore, but a mother in terror. She was a victim in this too. "Ma'am, we need to get you to the hospital," Jake said, tone firm but no longer accusatory. "You need to be checked out. Then you need to tell us everything." As if on cue, Elena's eyes fluttered. A wave of genuine dizziness overcame her, knees giving way. The security agent and specialist Carter barely managed to lower her to the floor before she lost consciousness. Her pulses thready. Carter called, fingers on Elena's neck. "She's in shock." The room erupted into controlled chaos. Jake keyed his radio. "Davis, medical team to private screening, stat. Subject collapsed. Confirmed narcotic situation, possible exposure." He guided Thor back into the corridor, not wanting him exposed to potential toxins. Within minutes, paramedics swarmed the room, efficient, focused. Jake gave a quick briefing. Female, late 20s, was wearing sophisticated prosthetic containing unknown crystalline substance. Collapsed after removal. Possible systemic shock or toxic exposure. The lead paramedic nodded sharply. They worked quickly, checking vitals, starting in 4, administering oxygen. As they lifted Elena onto the gurney, Jake's eyes fell on the hollow prosthetic. It was macabre art. Silicone warm like skin, interior a complex web of foam and plastic, creating sealed drug pockets. Designed to bypass pat-downs and scanners, exploiting caution afforded to pregnant women. "Jake," Specialist Carter said, holding up a small evidence bag with a metallic disc. "It's not just a patch. Look." She pointed to minuscule circuits. "I think it's a passive RFID tracker, so they could monitor her location." The sophistication sent a chill down Jake's spine. This wasn't a one-off. This was a system. He followed the gurney as it rushed through the terminal toward the ambulance bay, Thor pacing anxiously beside him. The crowd surged with renewed interest, phones held high to capture the unconscious woman being wheeled away. Officer Davis fell into step. Command is locking down all flights from Bucharest, pulling manifests for other single female travelers on similar routes. "Good," Jake said, gaze fixed on Elena's pale face. "This is a pipeline. She's just one courier." They reached the ambulance bay. Cool outside air shocking after the tense terminal atmosphere. Paramedics loaded the gurney with practiced efficiency. "I'm riding with her," Jake announced. He needed to be there when she woke up. She was their only key to unlocking this network. The lead paramedic nodded. Okay, but your dog stays. Jake hesitated. He looked at Thor, staring at the ambulance, body tense, letting out a low, concerned whine. He's still alerting, Davis said quietly. He knows it's not over. I know, Jake replied. He knelt, hands on either side of Thor's head. You did it, partner. You found it. Now go with Davis. Help them here. I'll be back. He trusted Davis implicitly, one of the few officers to obey without question. Thor licked his hand once, quick and anxious, but allowed Davis to take the leash. Jake climbed into the ambulance, taking the small bench opposite the paramedic monitoring Elena's floor. The doors slammed shut, sealing them in the sterile, beeping interior. As the ambulance pulled away, siren cutting through the airport Jake looked through the small rear window. He saw Davis and Thor standing side by side under harsh bay lights. Thor sat perfectly still, gaze locked on a departing vehicle, a silent sentinel watching his partner drive into the heart of the mystery he had uncovered. The screening was over, but the real investigation was just beginning, racing toward the hospital at 80 miles an hour. The ambulance was a world unto itself, a sterile, rattling capsule hurtling through the city. The siren's wail was a constant backdrop to the beeping heart monitor and the hiss of oxygen flowing into the mask. Inside, the air was thick with antiseptic, fear sweat, and a faint chemical odor from the prosthetic now in an evidence bag. Officer Jake Miller braced against the vehicle's sway, his eyes locked on Elena Petrova. She lay unconscious on the gurney, an oxygen mask clouding with each shallow breath, and 4 lines snaked from a saline bag into her arm. Stripped of her disguise, she looked young and fragile, a pawn in a game she couldn't control. The paramedic, Lisa, kept her focus divided between Elena's pale face and the medical equipment, blood pressure still too low. Heart rate all over the map, she reported, her voice clinical but concerned. This isn't just shock. Something is actively affecting her nervous system. As if on cue, Jake's police radio crackled. It was Davis, voice strained. Jake, preliminary result on the powder. It's bad. It's carfentanil, an opioid used to tranquilize elephants. A pinch could kill everyone in this terminal. It's 100 times stronger than fentanyl. Jake's blood seemed to freeze. He stared at Elena, at the 4 pumping fluids into her. She was carrying enough to kill a city block, sealed against her skin for hours. Could it have absorbed, leaked through her skin? Likely, Davis replied, grim. The compartment seals weren't designed for long-term skin contact. A tiny leak would act as a slow-release poison patch. A tiny, undetectable leak. The pieces clicked with terrifying clarity. Thor's desperate barks, his whines of anxiety. It hadn't just been about contraband. Thor wasn't just pointing out a crime. He was trying to save her life. The dog's senses had picked up escaping molecules of a lethal toxin. He'd been sounding a biological alarm. The hospital is prepped, Davis continued. Level 3 toxic exposure. And Jake, we're tracking that RFID signal. It's still active, pinging every cell tower. It's following your ambulance. They're tracking her, Jake muttered, a fresh wave of dread. The handlers knew their package was compromised. The tracker was a digital leash, and someone was watching. He looked at the evidence bag with the metallic disc, a silent tether to her captors. What was their protocol for a failed delivery? The ambulance screeched to a halt. The rear doors flung open, flooding the compartment with cold, diesel-tinged air. A trauma team was already there, blue scrubs, focused faces. Female, late 20s, possible transdermal exposure to carfentanil. Shock, respiratory depression, erratic cardiac rhythm. Lisa called out, voice rising over the siren's dying wail. The transfer was a blur of efficient motion. The gurney was lowered, wheels hit the ground, and the hospital team enveloped Elena, rushing her through automatic doors into the emergency department. Jake followed close behind, badge held up against questions. He was now a guardian, protecting a witness and ensuring her survival. He was shepherded into a small family room adjacent to the trauma bay. Through a large window, he had a direct view of the chaos surrounding Elena. They were cutting away her clothes, attaching electrodes, a doctor barking orders from the naloxone, toxicology panels, a central line. Jake's phone vibrated violently. He fumbled for it, eyes glued to the scene. It was Davis. Jake. The signal just dropped. The tracker went dead about 45 seconds after you arrived. They know she's here, Jake said, hand tightening around the phone. They know she's in the system. They've electronically cut her loose. Standard tradecraft. A compromised asset was a liability. The one active thread was severed. We're pulling every frame of airport camera footage from the last 6 hours. Davis said, keyboard clicks audible. Looking for anyone watching the checkpoint, reacting to the commotion. We'll find them. The assurance felt thin over growing uncertainty. Jake sank onto the vinyl couch. Adrenaline receded, leaving hollow, weary anxiety. He thought of Thor back at the airport, the dog's unwavering focus, his whines they'd misinterpreted as eagerness. The animal had seen the whole picture, hidden cargo, its lethal nature, the threat to the carrier, long before any human mind had pieced it together. The door opened and the doctor entered. She was in her 40s, sharp-eyed, no nonsense. Officer Miller? I'm Dr. Isabel Evans, head of toxicology. Your patient is stabilized for now. Repeated naloxone is counteracting the opioid, but at a battle, we've confirmed trace carfentanil in her bloodstream. Low concentration, but consistent with slow, chronic transdermal exposure. Will she recover? Jake asked, words feeling inadequate. From this exposure, we believe so. It was low dose, slow poisoning. It was weakening her, clouding judgment. Another 12 hours in that apparatus, and her respiratory system would have shut down. Dr. Evans paused, expression graver. However, during our initial ultrasound to check for internal trauma, we discovered structural anomalies. Anomalies? Jake felt his stomach tighten. The internal architecture isn't consistent with recent pregnancy or normal female physiology. We're seeing echoes of synthetic polymers, a network of embedded microvesicles and residual adhesive structures in her abdominal wall. It appears the main prosthetic was just the outer layer of a larger, more integrated apparatus. Jake stared, horror deepening from criminal act to body violation. It wasn't just a suit she put on. It was more invasive, more permanent. She hadn't just been carrying drugs. She'd been surgically or adhesively modified, her form altered to become a container. A living, breathing secret, created mercilessly. She needs immediate protective custody, Jake said, voice low and urgent. The people who did this know she's here. They know she's alive. They'll consider her a massive liability. Dr. Evans gave a firm nod. I'll alert hospital security and the chief of police, armed officer at her door, and another at the wing entrance. As the doctor left, Jake returned to window. Elena was resting now. Activity subsided into quiet monitoring. She looked peaceful in drug-induced sleep, a stark contrast to her brutal reality. A pawn, poisoned by her cargo, physically altered, electronically discarded. Now the fragile key to breaking a ring that exploited human desperation in the most inhuman way. The race against time wasn't over. It had shifted to a new, dangerous track. No longer about intercepting a shipment. It was about securing a living witness before the shadowy network could silence her permanently. And somewhere, a loyal German shepherd waited, knowing his job was only half done. The silence in the family room was absolute, a vacuum sealed against the hospital's distant sounds. Jake Miller stood sentinel at the window, hands braced against the sill, gaze fixed on Elena Petrova. The initial flurry had settled into watchful monitoring. To any observer, it was medical repose. But Jake, armed with the doctor's findings, saw a battlefield. The woman on the bed was a terrain, violated and booby-trapped. The door hissed open. Dr. Evans returned with an older, taller man with salt and pepper beard, and the bearing of someone who carried life-and-death decisions. Officer Miller, this is Dr. Eris Thorne, our head of surgical oncology. I've asked him to consult. Oncology? Jake asked, fresh fear striking. Is it cancer? No, nothing like that, Dr. Thorne said, voice a calm baritone. He moved to the window, analytical eyes studying Elena. But the skills for removing complex, integrated foreign bodies fall within our purview. What Dr. Evans described and what I've seen on scans is unlike anything I've encountered outside military medicine. He produced a tablet with MRI and CT scan images, a ghostly tapestry of Elena's abdomen. To Jake's untrained eye, confusing shadows and shapes. "Look here," Dr. Thorne said, zooming in. "This network isn't blood vessels or natural tissue. This is a substrate, a polymer mesh glued to her abdominal wall. It's biocompatible to avoid rejection, essentially a high-tech shelf glued inside her. His finger trace lines. And these, the microvesicles." He tapped dozens of small, round nodules embedded in the mesh. "They're empty now, but designed to be filled. They have microvalves, tiny ports for injecting or withdrawing material. The main prosthetic was a visual disguise. This," he pointed at the intricate web, "this is the long-term system." She wasn't a one-time courier. She was a reusable mule, turned into a living vending machine for poison. The horror unfolded in Jake's mind with chilling clarity. They hadn't just used her, they'd outfitted her. She was permanent infrastructure, ready for the next shipment. "The leaking carfentanil," Jake said, voice hoarse. "From one of these?" "Leading theory," Dr. Evans confirmed. "A valve failed or vesicle was damaged. A slow leak, given the potency, would cause her symptoms. She was being poisoned from the inside." Dr. Thorne looked from scans to Jake, expression grave. "Officer Miller, this substrate and vesicles are a constant risk of infection, rupture, and lethal exposure. They don't belong in the human body. They must be removed. Is that safe? Can you do it?" Jake asked, "Complex and delicate, but necessary. We'll use robotic-assisted laparoscopy, like defusing a bomb. One wrong move, one ruptured vesicle. Consequences could be catastrophic. We'll have toxicology and hazmat standby. We need her consent." At that moment, as if summoned, a soft moan came from the trauma bay. They turned to see Elena stirring. Her hand twitched, eyelids fluttered, then slowly opened. They were clouded with confusion and drug fog, but aware. Jake didn't wait. He moved quickly, doctors following. Elena's gaze drifted around the ceiling, lights, tubes, before landing on Jake. Recognition, then sheer panic flashed. She tried to sit up, a weak, aborted motion. "Where?" she croaked, voice raw. "You're in the hospital, Elena," Jake said, voice low and calm. He stood where she could see him clearly, without cap. "You collapsed. The doctors have been taking care of you." Her hand moved shakily to her stomach, feeling the flat plane beneath the hospital gown. The reality crashed down. The disguise was gone. The secret was out. A single tear escaped. "It's over," she whispered, closing her eyes. "It's over for them," Jake corrected gently. "But for you, it's a chance to start again. We need your help, and you need ours." He glanced at Dr. Thorne. "Ms. Petrova," Dr. Thorne began, voice reassuringly authoritative. "We found the internal device. The network embedded in your abdomen." Elena's eyes snapped open, wide with new terror, not of being caught, but of a truth she'd been forced to live with, now exposed. She shook her head weakly. "It's causing medical harm, Elena," Dr. Evans said, stepping closer. "Your collapse was from a toxin leaking from it. It will continue to threaten your life. We need to operate to remove it," Dr. Thorne said. "We cannot do it without your permission." Jake leaned in slightly. "Elena, the people who did this, they tracked you here. They know you failed. They know you're with us. The only way you're safe, the only way your son is safe, is if you help us stop them. This surgery, the device is evidence. It's the key to finding them. But we need you to say yes." He saw the war within her, ingrained fear of handlers against dawning liberation hope. She looked from Jake's earnest face to the doctor's concern. She thought of her son. They said it was a privilege to be chosen, to carry medicine, she murmured, voice barely audible, bitterness acrid. "They said if I ever talked, they would know that the device had a kill switch." The doctors exchanged a sharp glance. A kill switch changed everything. We'll scan for electronic or radioactive components immediately, Dr. Thorne said, mind racing through new protocols. We'll take every precaution. Elena looked at Jake, eyes searching for truth to trust. You'll protect my boy, Lucas, with my sister in Hamburg. They don't know about her. I will personally call Interpol and German police within 5 minutes, Jake vowed. He will be under protection by sunrise. A long, shuddering sigh escaped her. The last resistance flowed out. The kill switch was a bluff, one less chain binding her. This was her choice, her first free decision since this nightmare began. Yes, she breathed, voice firm with newfound resolve. Take it out of me. Please, get it out. Dr. Thorne nodded. We'll prep the ore. We move within the hour. He and Dr. Evans swept out, voices low and urgent, planning a surgery that was now also bomb disposal. Jake looked down at Elena. Her eyes were closed, but her face was different. No longer just fear, but fragile, newfound resolve. She had chosen a side. The revelation was complete. The hidden truth of her body was now their shared roadmap to the heart of the darkness that created it. The race was now against the clock in the operating room, and against unseen enemies who knew their living secret was about to be cut out. The operating wing of Central General Hospital was a world of hushed intensity, a stark contrast to the chaotic energy of the emergency department. The air was cooler, smelled sharply of sterilizing agents, and was filled with a low, rhythmic symphony of beeps and whirs from behind closed doors. Officer Jake Miller waited in a designated family liaison room, a space as impersonal and tense as the one he'd just left. The clock on the wall seemed to tick with exaggerated slowness. Each passing minute felt like an hour, each hour a small eternity. He had kept his promise. A secure call had been placed at Interpol, and through a patchwork of translators and liaisons, the German Federal Police had been alerted. A team was en route to the sister's apartment in Hamburg. The confirmation that Lucas was safe was the only thing holding Jake's own anxiety at bay. He clung to that small victory, using it as an anchor against the storm of what was happening in Operating Room 4. Inside that sterile chamber, under the blinding glare of surgical lights, a team led by Dr. Thorne was performing a high-stakes excavation. Robotic arms, controlled by the surgeon's precise movements, navigated the landscape of Elena Petrova's abdomen. The internal scans had been accurate, but seeing the reality on the high-definition monitors was still a shock. The polymer mesh was a grotesque, pearlescent web, clinging to the natural tissue with thousands of tiny, fibrous adhesions. The vesicles, like clusters of tiny, synthetic grapes, were nestled within it. The procedure was a painstaking dance of microdissection. Using cauterizing tools to minimize bleeding, Dr. Thorne and his team began the delicate work of separating the artificial from the organic. The hazmat specialist in the room, encased in a protective suit, stood ready with sealed containment units. Scalpel, Thorne murmured, his voice calm through his mask. The robotic arm responded, its tiny blade making an incision smaller than a paper cut near the first cluster of vesicles. Forceps. Another arm moved in, its pincers gently grasping the edge of the polymer mesh. Beginning separation. The room held its collective breath. This was the moment of maximum risk. If a vesicle ruptured, if a reservoir of the potent opioid aerosolized into the OR's controlled environment, the consequences would be immediate and devastating. But the technology held. The mesh, though deeply integrated, began to peel away. One by one, the tiny, empty vesicles were isolated, carefully detached, and placed into the waiting containment vessel, which was sealed with definitive hiss. The process was repeated, cluster by cluster, across the internal canvas of her body. It was less like surgery and more like defusing a complex biological IED. After 3 hours, Dr. Thorne finally straightened his back, a quiet sigh of relief audible over the hum of the machines. The substrate is fully removed. All visible vesicles are contained. We're clear. A nurse began the process of closing the microscopic incisions. The bomb had been defused. Later, in the recovery room, Jake was finally allowed to see Elena. She was drowsy from anesthesia, but conscious. The relief on her face was palpable, a physical weight lifted. The thing that had been inside her, a constant reminder of her captivity and danger, was gone. Dr. Thorne approached Jake, holding a small sealed biocontainer. Inside, floating in preservative fluid, was the entirety of the removed device. It looked like a piece of delicate, monstrous lace. "It's all there," Thorne said. "Forensics can have it." And we found no kill switch. No electronic components at all. It was a psychological leash, one of many they used to control her. This final piece of the medical puzzle shifted something in Elena. The last vestige of their power over her, the threat of remote execution, was revealed as a bluff. It unlocked the floodgates. Her voice was weak but clear as she began to talk, her gaze fixed on the ceiling as if reading from a scroll of painful memories. "His name is Victor," she began. "Victor Haas. He runs a charity, Logistica Humana. It's a front. They help women like me, displaced, desperate, with families to protect. They offer money, papers, a new life. The procedure was presented as a necessary medical step. They said it would strengthen my core for the difficult journeys ahead. They said the pouches would be used to transport life-saving insulin or antibiotics to war zones. We were heroes." She swallowed, her throat dry. Jake offered her a sip of water from a plastic cup. The first time was easy. They attached the false belly. It was empty, a test run through a small airport. I was so nervous, but nothing happened. I passed through security. I felt powerful. The second time, it was heavy. I didn't know what was inside. When I found out, she trailed off, tears welling again. When I said I wanted out, Victor showed me a live video feed of Lucas playing in his schoolyard. He said the next time I saw him, it would be in a coffin if I disobeyed. The device inside me, he said, was a tracker and a poison capsule. They could activate if I was captured. I believed him. I had to. Jake listened, his notebook forgotten. This was more than a confession. It was a testimony. "There are others," she insisted, her eyes finding his, burning with a new fire. "Many others. We are a network, a silent fleet. We don't know each other. We are given routes, flights, and a contact at the destination, a phrase to identify ourselves. Mine was, 'The stork has landed.' The contact would help me remove the prosthetic in a private bathroom. I would hand it over and get a bank transfer confirmation. 'Do you know who you were meeting today?' Jake asked, his voice barely a whisper. She shook her head. 'No name, just a description. A man in a blue baseball cap, carrying a copy of the Financial Times. He would be waiting near the arrival's information desk at Gate B12. Jake's mind was already racing. Gate B12. The airport. It was all circling back. He excused himself and stepped into the corridor, pulling out his phone. He called Davis. "Mark, listen. The ringleader is a man named Victor Haas. Front company Logistica Humana. The woman, Elena, was supposed to meet a contact at Gate B12, a man in a blue cap with Financial Times. The operation is active. There could be another courier on a flight arriving soon." Davis's voice was electric with renewed purpose. "B12, Jake, that's the gate for the incoming flight from Istanbul. It's due to land in 40 minutes. We've got time. We'll set up a perimeter. We'll get him." Jake ended the call and leaned against the cool hospital wall. The truth was now fully unfolded, and it was uglier and more vast than he had imagined. It wasn't just a smuggling ring. It was a sophisticated human exploitation network that used advanced technology and profound psychological terror. They preyed on the most vulnerable, turning mothers into mules and children into leverage. He looked back into Elena's room. She had fallen into a fitful sleep, the lines of fear on her face slightly softened. She was free from the physical prison they had built inside her. The race was now on to dismantle the rest of the machine, to ensure that Victor Haas and his Logistica Humana could never trap another soul, and it would all begin at Gate B12. The hunt was back on, back at the airport. The atmosphere was electric with contained, tactical energy. The news from the hospital had transformed the situation from a contained incident into a full-blown, active operation. Officer Mark Davis stood near the command post they'd set up in a secure office overlooking the bustling terminal, his gaze fixed on a large screen displaying the live feed from Gate B12. The gate area, soon to receive the incoming flight from Istanbul, looked deceptively normal. Travelers sat in rows of connected seats, scrolling through phones, or stood in line at a coffee kiosk. But Davis and his team saw a hunting ground. Jake's voice had been crisp and clear over the phone, relaying the identifying phrase. "The stork has landed," and the description of the contact. A man, blue baseball cap, Financial Times. All units, confirmed visual on location. Davis spoke into his throat mic. "Plainclothes teams, move into position. I want eyes on every male in a blue cap within a 100-yard radius of that gate. Do not engage. I repeat, do not engage. We wait for the courier." The plan was simple but needed perfect execution. They would let the handoff begin. They needed to see the second courier, the one carrying the contraband, identify herself to the contact. Only then would they have two key pieces of the puzzle, ensuring stronger charges and more leverage. At Davis's side, Thor sat unusually still. The frantic energy he displayed earlier was gone, replaced by a deep, focused calm. He understood the shift in tempo. This was the patient, silent part of the hunt. His dark eyes scanned the crowd on the monitors, his head occasionally tilting as if he, too, were analyzing the flow of human traffic for the one anomaly. "You smelling something already, buddy?" Davis murmured, running a hand over the dog's head. Thor's ear twitched, but he didn't break his concentration. This was a different kind of alert, not the desperate vocal warnings from before, but a quiet, professional intensity that showed his experience. 15 minutes before the flight was due to land, a figure matching description settled into a seat near the back of the gate area. A man in his late 40s with a trim build, wearing a navy blue baseball cap with a vague corporate logo. He held a folded copy of the Financial Times on his knee. He looked like any other business traveler, utterly unremarkable, perfect for the job. "We have our pigeon." Davis's voice was a low whisper over the comms. "Team 2, you have the lead. Do not spook him." The plainclothes officers, a man and a woman posing as a couple on vacation, casually took seats a few rows away from the man, their body language relaxed, their conversation light, but their eyes missing nothing. The tension in command post ratcheted up another notch. The flight from Istanbul landed on time. The disembarkation announcement echoed through the terminal, a slow trickle. Then a steady stream of passengers began to flow out of the jet bridge and into the gate area. Families reuniting, tourists looking for directions, business people heading for the exit. The team watched every face, every gesture. And then Thor stood up. It wasn't a lunge or a bark. It was a deliberate, solid shift in posture. His body went rigid, his tail extended. His nose pointed like an arrow toward the monitor showing the live feed from the gate. A low, steady rumble started deep in his chest, the same sound he'd made hours before to Lena Petrova. But this time, he remained completely silent otherwise, a study in controlled intensity. "Davis, he's alerting," one of the texts said, though it was unnecessary. Everyone in the room felt it. "Zoom in," Davis commanded. "Where is he looking?" The camera panned, zooming in on the crowd exiting the jet bridge. And there she was, a woman, younger than Elena, with auburn hair pulled into a messy bun. She wore a loose, flowing blouse and a long, bohemian-style skirt that did little to hide the distinct, rounded curve of her abdomen. She moved with the same deliberate, careful slowness, one hand resting protectively on her stomach. She looked tired, overwhelmed, the perfect picture of a pregnant woman after a long flight. She paused at the entrance to the gate area, her eyes scanning the seated travelers. They landed on the man with the blue cap and the newspaper. She took a hesitant step toward him. Thor's silent focus intensified, his body trembling with the effort of staying still, when every instinct screamed to act. "That's our courier," Davis said, his voice tight with adrenaline. "Thor has confirmed. All teams move in. Now!" The scene unfolded with breathtaking speed. The couple near the man stood up, badges flashing. "Police, stay where you are." The man in the blue cap froze, his eyes wide with shock, the Financial Times fluttering to the floor. Simultaneously, Two other plainclothes officers converged on the auburn-haired woman. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us," one said, his voice firm but not unkind. Panic erupted, but it was contained. The woman, whose name would later be identified as Anya, began to cry, her hands flying to her face. "I don't understand. Please, my baby." But the performance, which might have worked on a lone security guard, was useless against the certainty provided by a German shepherd's nose. As she was led away, the fabric of her skirt brushed against a luggage cart, and a faint, identical clink echoed, the sound of the hidden harness. The man who refused to speak was found to be carrying a forged ID, a burner phone with a single number programmed into it, and a key card for a nearby airport hotel. Back in the command post, Davis knelt beside Thor, wrapping his arms around the dog's powerful neck. He didn't rush the moment, letting the full weight of their success settle between them. "You brilliant animal," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You incredible, brilliant partner." Thor panted, his tail wagging slowly, finally allowing the tension to leave his body. The job was done. The trust between human and canine, the hours of training, the shared purpose, it had all culminated in this perfect, silent communication that had broken a criminal network. Within the hour, a SWAT team raided the hotel room. It was empty, meticulously cleaned, but forensics would later lift a single, clear fingerprint from the remote control. It would be matched to a man named Victor Haas, a German national with a history of minor fraud, now the prime suspect in an international trafficking and human exploitation ring. Jake returned to the airport just as the last of the suspects were being processed. The sun was setting, casting long, orange shadows across the tarmac. He found Davis and Thor in the now quiet command post. He didn't need a debrief. The proud, weary look on Davis's face and the calm, satisfied posture of his partner said it all. He walked over to Thor and sank to his knees, looking the dog directly in his intelligent eyes. "You did it," Jake said, his voice raw with a mix of exhaustion and profound respect. "You saved her and you stopped them. All of them." Thor leaned forward and pressed his forehead against Jake's, a soft whine escaping him. It was a gesture of complete trust, of a bond that had been tested in fire and had not just held, but had been forged into something unbreakable. The net had closed, thanks to loyalty, instinct, and the unwavering courage of a four-legged officer who saw the world not in lies and disguises, but in simple, undeniable truths. The first major battle was won. The war against Victor Haas was just beginning, but for tonight, they had struck a devastating blow. The media storm broke with the force of a hurricane. By the following morning, the story was everywhere. News channels ran with banners like K9 uncovers human trafficking ring, and Hero Dog saves pregnant smuggler. A grainy, powerful photo of Jake kneeling with Thor, taken by a passenger during the initial chaos, became the defining image of the case. Thor's focused eyes and Jake's determined profile spoke volumes more than any press release could. Jake avoided the cameras, letting the department's public relations team handle the statements. He sat at his desk in the precinct, the phone ringing incessantly with requests for interviews, collaboration, offers from other police departments, and even a tentative inquiry from a movie producer. He ignored them all, sipping bitter coffee and trying to process the seismic shift the last 48 hours had brought. The scope of the operation was staggering. With Elena's testimony and the evidence from the implanted device, a multi-agency task force had been formed. Logistica Humana, offices in 3 countries were raided simultaneously. Dozens of women, all with similar internal modifications, were identified and taken into protective custody, their stories echoing Elena's, a mix of coercion, manipulation, and terrifying threats. Victor Haas remained at large, but Interpol had issued a red notice, and his digital footprint was being hunted across the globe. The man in the blue cap, a mid-level facilitator named Carl, was singing like a canary, trying to bargain for a reduced sentence. It was a resounding victory. But for Jake, the true weight of it wasn't in the headlines or the dismantled network. It was in the quiet moments. Later that afternoon, he and Thor made a final, symbolic walk to the airport terminal. The scene of the chaos was now just a polished floor again, the tide of humanity flowing uninterrupted. But the energy was different. As they passed, people did double takes. Whispers of "that's a dog," and "Officer Miller," followed them. A mother pointed Thor out to her young daughter, who waved shyly. An elderly man stopped Jake, gripping his hand with both of his. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "What you two did, it restores faith." Thor, for his part, took the attention in stride. He walked with his usual calm authority, his tail held high, but his focus was solely on Jake. The noise, the stares, the adulation, it was all just background static. His world began and ended with his partner. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Jake drove them to a quiet, familiar spot, a hilltop park that overlooked the city and, in the distance, the airport runways. It was their place, away from the uniforms and the radios and the expectations. He opened the back of the patrol SUV, and Thor leaped out, immediately sniffing the air, his tail wagging in a lazy, contented rhythm. Jake sat on the cool grass, leaning against a large oak tree. Thor came and settled beside him, resting his head heavily on Jake's leg with a deep, satisfied sigh. The city lights began to twinkle below, and in the distance, they could see the tiny, moving lights of planes taking off and landing, the endless cycle of arrivals and departures that had been a backdrop to their lives. "You know, buddy," Jake began, his voice soft in the evening quiet, "I've been thinking about what that reporter said, about you being a hero." He scratched behind Thor's ears, the way he loved. "But that's not quite it, is it? A hero chooses to be brave. You just are. You don't think about it. You don't weigh the risks. You see what's wrong, and you act. It's who you are." He looked down at the dog, whose eyes were half closed in contentment. "That woman, Elena, she wasn't a criminal to you. She was a person in trouble. You smelled the poison, you smelled the fear, and you knew. You always know." Jake's voice grew quieter, more reflective. "In our job, we see so much darkness. We start to expect the worst in people. We build walls. But you don't have any walls. You just have trust. Trust in your nose, trust in your instincts, and trust in me." Thor let out a soft woof, as if in agreement, and nuzzled closer. "Maybe that's the real lesson," Jake mused, staring out at the horizon. "Maybe we all need to listen to our guts a little more. To act on what we feel is right, not just what we think is safe. To have a little more of you." He fell silent for a long time, just sitting with his partner, watching the day end. The chaos of the case, the media frenzy, the bureaucratic aftermath, it all faded into insignificance against this simple, profound truth. The bond they shared was the anchor in the storm, the quiet center in a spinning world. Then Jake had a thought that tied everything together, the moment of clarity the reviewer had asked for. You know, from that very first bark in the terminal, Thor wasn't just detecting a crime. He was trying to save a life. He knew she was in danger before any of us did. That's what you were trying to tell us, weren't you, boy? That's what all the barking was about. Thor looked up at him, his dark eyes seeming to understand every word. In that moment, the entire story came full circle, not as a case of drug interdiction, but as a rescue mission that only a dog could see from beginning. Finally, Jake stood up, brushing the grass from his pants. "Come on, partner. Let's go home." Thor stood, shook himself off, and trotted happily to the passenger side of the SUV, waiting for Jake to open the door. As Jake drove him away from the park, the radio was silent for the first time in days. The only sound was Thor's steady, peaceful breathing from the seat beside him. The story of the K-9 who uncovered a global smuggling ring would be told and retold. It would lead to new training protocols for airport security dogs, focusing on synthetic material detection and behavioral analysis. It would change procedures for screening passengers, adding new layers of protection for the vulnerable. But for Jake Miller, the most important change was personal. It was a renewed understanding of the pure, unshakable loyalty that walked beside him every day. As they pulled into Jake's driveway, the porch light was on, a warm, welcoming beacon. Thor's tail thumped against the seat, his excitement for the simple ritual of dinner and a warm bed palpable. Jake turned off the engine and sat for a moment in the dark, looking at his home, his sanctuary. He reached over and placed a hand on Thor's back, feeling the strong, steady heartbeat. Another day, another life saved, he whispered, repeating the mantra that had seen him through so much. Thor turned and licked his hand once, a quick, affectionate gesture. And in that simple, silent exchange, the story found its true ending. Not in headlines or accolades, but in the quiet understanding between a man and his dog. A reminder that in a world of complex lies, the most powerful truths are often spoken without a single word, guided by a loyalty that never wavers and an instinct that never fails.